Chicago.
You don't have the guts to be what you want to be. You need people like me. You need people like me.
I don't think you're ready for.
So I started recording Live from the Ill at the end of 1993, bleeding into 94. And I had finally gotten my own MP, so this was going to be the first album that I was going to produce entirely by myself. Prior to that, I had a couple releases, and it was produced as a trio between myself, my boy DJ Sean, and Demo. And they were the ones that schooled me, on how to use an MP and the SP12 and the top-notch production gear at that time. So I didn't realize it at the time, but my technique for making beats wasn't the normal way that it was done. I was making beats primarily out of rap tapes from my own collection of rap music that I liked. So usually people would be taking James Brown samples or jazz samples or Parliament samples, building their track around that, while I would still take a main sample, I would build a track around my existing collection. So I was taking samples from samples that had already been sampled, and I was taking them from the source of which they had been sampled. So it was giving the production quality its own sound. In addition, it just was a unique way to do it. Nobody really was doing it that way. So I wouldn't consider it beat jacking because I wasn't taking the same beat. I was basically utilizing their beat and then creating something original from that.
You're setting out one motherfucker move.
First, I found the bass line I was going to use, which was a normal sample, but then I built around that sample, like I said, with rap records. So for instance, on that song, I took the drums and a little small piece of the organ sample from Eric B. as President, and I flipped the drums and slowed them down, I believe, to the tempo of the song, which didn't match the Rakim song, so they had a different feel to them. I added the Lynn Collins Think, yeah, woo, except I took it instead of the Lynn Collins record, I took it from the Raw Bass record. So I had the Raw Bass 12-inch. Every time it would come, I put my hand on the records. So every time the yeah and the who would come, I put my hand on the record and slow it down. So that way it had its own feel to it. Because the sample had been used a bunch of times. I know Skinny Boys at that time had utilized it, and I liked it, but I didn't want to just use it as part of the beat the way other people had used it. So I basically took just 1 second and put my hand on it. So if you listen to the beat, you'll notice that. So I always kept 3.5-inch discs for the MP full of samples I liked that weren't good enough to loop, but they were good sounds, primarily horns. So on Live from the Ill, the song specifically, but throughout the whole album, I would utilize those where I felt like they fit in the verse. And I would just tap in manually, never as part of the sequence. I would just tap in manually random horn sounds and different samples that I felt fit with that specific rap. Now, as far as the intro of the song, there's a Scarface movie sample. Now, a lot of people might not know DJ Chaos One is half of the Cash Money Brothers, CMB. And the CMB mixtapes used to be real big time in the city. Even on out to, East Chicago, Hammond, Gary, these mixtapes made their way around. So anyway, they used to use a lot of Scarface movie samples, and it always would put you on charge for the mix to begin. So I wanted to, knowing that I was gonna try to get this out beyond my own region, I wanted to utilize what they were doing in a similar fashion and use those samples to really put the, put the listener on 10 and prepare for what was about to go down. Now, because I had my own wax out, I had an advantage, because at the time you couldn't scratch or really sample your own music in your song because there was no way to scratch it if it wasn't on wax. So I utilized that as part of the hook, and I scratched in my old song from the album before, and the line is Live from the Ill, E.C.Illa Beat Freaker. So I made that the primary portion and the title portion of the chorus. So I sample my own voice, and then I sandwich it between 2 other samples. One Tim Dog from Fuck Compton, where he says, I don't give a fuck where you came from. And the other from an artist named Uptown, who had a dope 12-inch out at that time called Dope on Plastic. So when I completed the beat, the shit was sounding so hard to me. I was like, man, I gotta do this justice and figure out a way, a good first line to really capture what it was I was trying to put out there. And that's what the first line really did. I say, I'm fucking it up like you never seen, making more moves than Ben Vereen. And I felt like that line captured not only where I was at in my career, but Ill State as a crew as well. Really what we wanted. We were about making moves. When Tupac came to the China Club, the chamber opens up. This was also right around the same time that Ill State, was running Naughty by Nature's name through the mud, for giving Twista a hard time. So basically we had major label acts and they really had to come through us in order to be able to maneuver around the city. And it really was a testament to the type of shit that we was on, in terms of moves we was making and the power that we had obtained as a crew. So prior to Live from the Ill, I had recorded my other releases at Chicago Tracks. And Chicago Tracks was like the home base for Al Jorgensen and R. Kelly. So they would occupy the better studio, the A room they called it, while I would record in the B room, which was still a very good studio, but it wasn't like major label like they were doing. So I more or less learned how to record professionally by watching Al Jorgensen and R. Kelly when they would have their sessions in the A room. Now, say what you will about both of them as characters or, the stories behind the type of antics, that they do. Creatively speaking, they were so serious about their craft that I was able to really, be motivated and utilize a lot of what I learned from both Al and R. Kelly in terms of watching them record. That I was really taking some high-end production values and implementing them into, very gutter underground rap, and it was to my advantage. Chicago Tracks had an in-house producer by the name of Dwayne Buford, and he was working with a group, 10 Trey. And 10 Trey and I were both biting for the same label spot on a new label called Smash Records, which was a big deal at the time because it was one of the very few Chicago-based labels that had major distribution. So anybody who was trying to get on, this was a big opportunity. Needless to say, they ended up going with 10 Trey, and I kind of felt like that was an opportunity missed. With all respect to 10 Trey, obviously that was something I was trying to make happen. That didn't occur. Between that and it was a steep hourly rate over there, I just was starting to weigh my options in terms of where else I might record. Now, Tracks had been telling me about the studio him and K-Tone were recording at, which was about 15 minutes north of Chicago Tracks. And he had swore by the engineer he was working with up there, a dude by the name of Dane Rowade. So Dane had engineered a bunch of pretty big house music records. So he had a bit of a name for himself. Not anything I was particularly familiar with, so I was on the fence about it a little bit. And it wasn't until Tracks had played me the final mix to a song D to the S made called Doomsday. And there's a part in Doomsday when K-Tone says, because your voice sounds whack without effects and EQ. But what Dane did is he put effects and EQ on the specific words, effects and EQ. And when I heard that, my mind was so blown at the skill and how dope it sounded that I was sold. At that point, I knew I was going to record Live from the Ill at Off-Road Studio. Now, it's funny because Tracks always told me that Live from the Ill was his favorite of my older classic albums. And I'm sure it's because Dane, the way he engineered the album, it had a D to the S element to it, you know, in terms of the mix and the engineering. And Dane always had a real good way of bringing out the depth and the bottom and the samples. So it's of no surprise to me that he appreciated that album. To me, Dane was like the Paul C of Chicago in terms of his engineering ability, and he just had an ear that really was unique and brought out the best in the samples that I brought to him. The beat for Low Life or No Life is crazy simple. I just took a piece, real small piece of a real nasty keyboard lead from a Too Short record and played it on the 16 levels pads on the MP. So I had that was kind of like the bass line and keyboard all in one. And then I jacked the drums from Ghetto Boys the other level and kind of, you know, looped it in a different way. And that was basically it. There was a little sound I took from, I think, hardcore, EPMD, or Manslaughter maybe. Anyway, it was just little tiny pieces, but I had that shit wanging. Boom, 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 boom. And the studio was always full. Ill State Assassins were at most of the sessions. This particular day, I had Chain from the Chamber, D.Illa, Kingdom Rock, K-Tone, E.C.Illa. So basically the song was originally supposed to be 2 16s. But what we ended up doing is I just faded out in the middle of my second verse and then let Kingdom and KX and K-Tone freestyle over it. And it gave the song, you know, an element not only of originality, but flow, like you were almost there at the session. And then in the background, through the whole beat, I had it going Low Life, No Life, and that was D.Illa and Chain of the Chamber through the background of the whole entire song. So by the end of it, it was more or less just like a freestyle session over a real simple beat, but it really is maybe one of my favorite beats I ever made.
That's the thing I see in my mind.
Ill Is. Now, Ill Is unique in a couple of ways. First, it's like the prelude to What You Be About. This was the first time I had taken my little tape recorder that I used in What You Be About, except the first time I used it was on Ill Is, and it was basically the same concept, except with Ill State, the crew. So, you know, I would get samples of each of them repping the crew, and then that would be the chorus, much like I did at the end of What You Be About. So I took a sample from a Fifth Dimension record from the album Earthbound. I think it's called Be Here Now. And it's at the very end of the song, there's a little piece. And so this piece, just right before the song is fading out, it's just these real high-end, space-agey keyboards. So I just loop it over a drum loop. Again, a very simple beat. Put the little Fifth Dimension loop along with the drums. Add these Ill State representations off the tape recorder. So all this was very bare bones. But if you listen back to the song, it works. So I was just not trying to overanalyze what I was doing. I was just making underground rap, you know. And though it sounded very underground, it also had all these unique elements to it that really made it stand out from the rest.
What's up? You know, we in the motherfucking studio with old ass
Interlude, which is a play on interlude. And Slang had done the artwork for the album. He had actually done the artwork for 2 previous releases as well, so he was kind of my go-to artist at the time. And I just had a kind of a jazz beat. I didn't really write a whole song to it, so I knew going in that it was going to be an interlude. However, and Slang can attest to this, and I apologize to him, when we were in the studio after I spit the verse, Slang spit a verse too. and it didn't ultimately end up making the album because the beat tapered out, because I only tracked it out for about maybe a minute and a half. So I ended up just fading it out on Slang's part, and Slang came to me years later. Well, actually he came to me then, but we still was talking about it years later. How he was like, man, didn't include my verse. I wish my verse was on there. And I wish his verse was on there too. It would have been dope. It was cool. But when we got that final mix down, that was ultimately how it ended up. And I wish I had those 2-inch reels. I'll fuck around and mix it down again for him. I had come to Slang and I told him I really wanted an album cover that encompassed the culture, you know, that was a true representation of the graph crews at the time, Chicago as a whole. It just really was encompassing all the elements. So, you know, he's the go-to guy who was going to hook it up. And I was inspired by, you know, albums that I loved previous to that. Even going back into the 80s, Nucleus, Jam on Revenge had dope art. Just Ice, back to the old school, very dope art. Schoolie D, Saturday Night, PSK, he did his own art on all that. So to me, I didn't really feel like I was doing something unique. What became original about it though was it was groundbreaking for Chicago. Chicago was being viewed. These graffiti crews were getting some recognition, and so it was just a matter of the presentation was what became unique about what we were doing. Not that it had never been done before, but it had never been done in a Chicago style. Shout out X-Men, UAC, MUL, you know, all the writers, my boys, Telly, Orko, Source, Grieve, Teal, you know, Riot One, just a lot of great artists throughout the city, and these crews and just the individuals that made up these crews. They were an important element, and I was happy to encompass them in some form to make sure that they got represented and not overlooked, you know. It Don't Stop was the first single and ended up being, you know, one of the more important parts of the album. I remember being at Trax's house on South Shore, me and K-Tone practicing the chorus, and anybody who knows D to the S and the history of Ill State knows K-Tone had one of the most original voices, a great rap voice. And so I knew I wanted him to do the chorus special for this. And I remember being in the hallway at Trax's crib on South Shore, Ill State all there, and us just practicing how he was gonna say it. 1, 2, dig it 3 for the real hard rocks. Let them suckers drop and it won't stop. 4, 5, 6, 6, we all up in the mix. Chicago hip hop and it don't stop. And just K-Tone's voice, you know, was exactly how I wanted it. I took the sample for It Don't Stop from a McCoy Tyner record, who was a, you know, respected jazz artist. Had a bunch of McCoy Tyner records. Funny thing about jazz samples is once you get it, you might not be able to find it again because the song is so off the cuff and the freestyle that if I find a little piano riff or a little portion on the loop, to find it again was always a challenge. So I never actually found the sample again. I took it, but when I tried to go back and see about it, I couldn't track it down. So if anybody's able to find that McCoy Tyner sample, let me know. I'd be curious to know about it. But I took this piano sample from one of his albums. I think I just had a basic drum loop, a couple sounds I know from a Mr. Me and DJ 2020 album, that I think were James Brown samples. Put it all together. The tempo was a little quicker than some of the other beats on the album. I think between 92 and 94 beats per minute. I just rocked it, and then K-Tone makes this classic chorus, you know, that went on to be an important part of Chicago hip-hop history, in my opinion. Now, Ill Murder Epic was one of 2 songs I carried over from my previous Ill State of Mind album. And the beat was kind of a funny story because I found the Isaac Hayes record that I took the sample from on the street, actually laying on the street, just beat up amongst garbage and litter. So I take the record home, not really knowing what it was about or anything, and it played, you know, like you might imagine, horribly, like it had been out in the elements and got its ass kicked. So I put it on, and it's got 1,000 crackles, and it's warped, and it's, you know, barely playing on the turntable. But I find a little piece that I like on it, and I take the sample. So when you listen to the music in the background, you'll hear all these crazy, you know, cracks and everything within the damaged record that I took it from. But it worked for the aura of the story. You know, I want to always try to include a story rap in every album. You know, I'm just old school like that. So this was the story rap, and the sample and the condition of the record all came into play with creating the vibe of the song. And the chorus was dope. I found some good horns, got an MC Shan scratch in there. But the most important and unique element of Ill Murder Epic is that's where the sample from What You Be About comes from. There's a part where I say, they said what you be about before we rip shout, and I just took the What You Be About. And so when I implemented it in the song What You Be About, that's all you hear, What You Be About, What You Be About. And that, for those that don't know, is taken from Ill Murder Epic.
Oh, go ahead. Man, fuck you, punk motherfucker. Cabrón.
Funky Like This was debuted on the album before, and so I expanded on this album. I put my girl D.Illa on it and E.C.Illa. It's just, again, another simple beat. I think I took a Kid Capri sample from his actual album that he put out on Cold Chillin' in the very early 90s as the chorus. But the most interesting thing about Funky Like This is Common was present at the recording session. So we're at Chicago Tracks where I recorded my verse, and we're working on the song. Common happens to be there for something unrelated, and I invite him to sit in, and we're hanging out at the session, and he's feeling the song. At which point I approach him and, you know, off to the side, and I say, hey, you know, if you want to hop on this on the low. Now keep in mind, he's just signed to Relativity. He, Can I Borrow a Dollar is out. I don't think Resurrection is out yet. So he's got, you know, a little juice within the city, but he's not blown up. But I also know I'm more or less approaching him on a solid. I'm not trying to put out money or nothing. But he's feeling the song. He gets to writing on to it. And we're pretty close to the point where he'll hop in the booth. And I believe it was Twilight Tone was with him, and dude gets in his ear and it's basically more or less in his ear about not getting no money up front, and that he shouldn't hop in there without any of that getting ironed out. Needless to say, I didn't really approach him on that level. We didn't end up doing it, but it was love. But it's an unknown detail about Funky Like This is that Common was, I would say, 80% ready to hop in the booth and jump on the song. And it's unfortunate it didn't happen, but it makes for a good story, right?
You know what I'm saying?
You said to me, I'm out of my mind.
Now this was the outro, the last song on the album. And I have the beat. I don't know that it's going to be the outro. It's just an extra beat that I've tracked out that I'm prepared to do something with. And I'm running low on funds. We're going to need to be done recording this album and mixing it soon. So at this particular session, I have a little time left over, and I decide, okay, I'm just going to freestyle over the beat. We'll make it an outro to end the album on. So, you know, keep in mind, this is early '94. And off top, I can't really think of any recorded songs that were off the head. So I think, I'm not suggesting it was groundbreaking, but for that era, there wasn't, you know, a lot of freestyles on wax or songs recorded off the top. So I just went in the booth, I spit a bit, ended up with some shout outs to the crew, and ended the album like that. And little did I know, we put it out like we put out all the other stuff in the past, and it would lead me to greater things. So Live from the Ill, the album, not only, is it personal to me and important in a lot of respects to a lot of different individuals who went on to do great things, but I really think most importantly it captured the moment in Chicago hip hop history. 1994, shit was real.
Yo, this is Cosmo D for Nucleus and Jam On Productions. What makes a classic? In hip-hop, a classic pushes the limits of the art form. It separates itself from the rest. It changes the direction of the game. For Chicago and underground rap, the album you just purchased was exactly that, a certified classic. E.C.Illa's Live from the Ill.